The light from the twin suns of Lumen Prime was gentle and kind. It warmed the white stone of the observatory where Una stood, her long silver fingers tracing the edge of a data slate. The view was, as always, beautiful. Her world was a painting of soft pastels, serene seas, and graceful spires that reached for the heavens. But the data on the slate was a black stain on the perfect picture. It showed the end of everything. The Vorax were coming. The reports from the outer colonies were not just words. They were final, horrific messages. Videos of living shadow that flowed over cities, absorbing all life, all light, leaving only cold, gray stone. Sound recordings that ended not with a bang, but with a terrible, final silence. The Aurelian Collective had tried. Their fleets, elegant and swift, had been swallowed whole. Their energy lances, designed to disable and deter, did nothing to the endless, mindless hunger of the swarm. They were a people of philosophy, of art, of deep spiritual connection. War was a distant, ugly concept. And now it was here. Una turned from the window. The High Council was assembled, their luminous faces etched with a fear they had never known before. "There are no more options," said an elder, his voice a whisper. "Our defenses are shattered. Our people are fleeing, but to where? The Vorax will find them. It will find us all." A heavy silence filled the room. It was the silence of a species accepting its end. Then, from the corner, a soft voice spoke. It was Sue, the youngest of the spiritual attendants. Her light trembled, but her voice was clear. "We have sent our bodies to fight. We have sent our minds to reason. Both have failed. There is one channel left untouched. The great harmony. We could send out a prayer." The elders looked at her, some with pity, some with a faint, desperate hope. A prayer? To whom? Their own gods were silent, concepts of energy and balance that offered no armies. But Sue continued, "Not to our gods. A prayer into the void. A call for help, set on every frequency, in every form of energy we know. A plea for salvation, for intervention." "It is a fantasy," muttered a counselor. "It is our final act," Una said, her own decision settling like a stone in her heart. "Let our last action not be one of fear, but of hope. Let the universe know that the Aurelians of Lumen Prime existed, and that we asked for mercy. Prepare the transmission. Put all our remaining power into it. We will pray for angels, for warriors of light to deliver us." The order was given. Across the crippled networks of their civilization, a single powerful signal was compiled. It contained their history, their art, the music of their crystals, images of their beautiful, fragile world, and the horrifying scans of the Vorax advance. And woven through it all, a simple repeating plea, a cry from the heart. Help us. The great dish on Lumen Prime glowed with a final, brilliant surge of power. The prayer shot into the cosmic void, a bottle thrown into a dark, endless ocean, weeks of travel away. On the very edge of charted space, the signal was weak and garbled. It washed over a lonely, potato-shaped rock that housed deep listening post K7. Inside, the air smelled of recycled oxygen and instant noodles. Lee was half asleep in her chair, a headphone dangling from one ear. She was monitoring the usual background noise of the universe, the hiss of dying stars, the faint echoes of old human broadcasts, the boring, predictable pulse of nebulas. She was thinking about her next leave, about seeing real sunlight, when a chime, soft but persistent, made her blink. It was a pattern. Not natural. She sat up, her fingers flying across the console. The signal was a mess, broken by interference and distance, but her software began to stitch it together. Images flickered on her screen. Strange, beautiful cities. Alien faces full of sorrow. Then the other thing. The swarm. A wave of pure consumption, like a cancer spreading across planets. Her blood went cold. This wasn't just a first contact signal. This was a distress call of apocalyptic scale. Jun! Get over here. Now. Jun floated in from the maintenance shaft, a grease smudge on his cheek. He was the pilot and engineer, the one who kept their tin can running. What? Found another space whale song? Look. Lee pointed at her screen, now showing the clearest image they had. A Vorax tendril enveloping an Aurelian spire, dissolving it into dust. Chun's playful smirk vanished. That's not good. Understatement. They're begging for help. They're calling for. Lee played the audio layer. The translated text scrolled alongside the haunting, melodic alien language. Saviors from the stars, holy warriors, angels of deliverance. Jun let out a low whistle. Angels, huh? They're gonna be disappointed. The only thing we've got out here is us, and half our coffee synthesizer is broken. We have to send this to Central, Lee said, her voice tense. Priority 1, cataclysmic threat. They need to see this. Jun nodded, already moving to the comm array. On it, but you know what this means, right? If Central moves, they're not sending diplomats. They're sending the Legion. Lee looked back at the alien's face on her screen, so full of desperate hope. She thought of the human First Rapid Response Legion, of the stories that came back from the frontier. They weren't called Hell's Gate for their kindness. They were the fire you used to burn out a forest fire. A necessary, terrifying evil. I know, she said quietly, to the alien on the screen, to herself. I know exactly what it means. On Earth, in a room buried under mountains of concrete and data screens, the signal from K7 played. Commanders and strategists watched, their expressions grim. The tactical analysis was quick and brutal. The Vorax were a Class 12 bio-devourer. Left unchecked, they would eventually hit human colonies. The Aurelians, for all their beauty, had no viable military. They were lambs before the slaughter. Admiral Min, a man with a face like weathered stone, leaned back in his chair. The alien's plea for angels played on a loop in the corner of the main screen. He muted it. Sentiment is a luxury, he stated, his voice filling the quiet room. They don't need poetry. They need a wall of steel and fire that will stop this thing in its tracks. They need the enemy to be more afraid of us than we are of it. He turned to his operations officer. Dispatch the First Rapid Response Legion. Full combat package. Rules of engagement. Total engagement. Objective: eradicate the Vorax threat and secure the Aurelian homeworld as a strategic forward base. There were no debates about salvation or angels. There were logistics, jump coordinates, ammunition loads, fleet formations. The humans were not answering a prayer. They were answering a tactical alert. They were going to war. On the flagship Unyielding Resolve, the crew prepared for the jump. Soldiers in charcoal gray armor checked their weapons. The sounds of loading magazines and power cells clicking into place a familiar chorus. There were no rousing speeches about glory or divine mandate. Sergeants like G walked the bays, her eyes sharp, checking seals and sightlines. Check your oxygen. Check your neighbor's seals. This is a bug hunt. A big one. Don't get sloppy. In his cockpit on a support carrier, June, having been ordered to guide the fleet to the source, ran final calculations. Lee was beside him, now attached as a field translator. She looked at the swirling blue of the warp tunnel forming ahead of the fleet, a massive, ugly tear in space made by human engines. They are praying for light, she whispered. More to herself than to Jun. Jun didn't look up from his console, his face lit by the cold, tactical glow. Then it's a good thing we're bringing the dark, he said, and pushed the lever forward. The human fleet, a spear of grim metal and silent purpose shot into the warp. They were not coming with hymns. They were coming with the deafening silence before the storm. Far away, on Lumen Prime, the Aurelians gathered, their eyes turned to the skies, waiting for a miracle. They had prayed for angels. Their answer was already en route, forged in the fires of humanity's own endless, brutal struggle to survive. On Lumen Prime, hope was a fragile, flickering thing. The Aurelians gathered in the great plaza of the Holy Citadel, their forms glowing softly in the twilight of the twin suns. They sang the old harmonies, the songs of light and creation, their voices weaving together in a tapestry of sound meant to welcome divinity. Sue stood beside High Priestess Una, her heart a drumbeat of anxious hope. The sensors had detected the warp signatures hours ago. Something was coming from the exact direction of their prayer. It had to be a sign dot in the command bunker buried beneath the plaza. The mood was different. The few remaining military officers watched their scanners with a mixture of awe and dread. The objects emerging from warp were not like anything in their databases. They were not sleek or shining. They were angular, brutal blocks of metal, scarred and pitted from travel. Their energy signatures were not harmonious fields, but raging, contained infernos of power. They filled the space around Lumen Prime, not with light, but with a cold, radio wave silence that felt heavier than noise. The largest ship, a monstrous dagger of dark gray alloy, took position directly above the Citadel. It blocked the suns. A deep, mechanical groan echoed through the atmosphere as something detached from its belly. It was a dropship, but it looked like a clenched fist falling from the sky. The singing in the plaza faltered, then died. The Aurelians watched, their lights dimming with instinctive fear. The object did not float down. It tore through the clouds, engines firing in harsh, sudden bursts to slow its descent only at the last second. It hit the ground, not on the designated landing pad of polished crystal, but in the middle of the sacred garden, crushing centuries-old luminous flora under its weight. The impact was a physical shockwave that made the ground tremble. A door hissed open, releasing a cloud of vapor that smelled of ozone and cold metal. From the gloom within, a shape emerged. It was tall, wider than two Aurelians. It was not a being of flesh, but a shell of sculpted armor, the color of charcoal and dried blood. Its face was a blank, dark visor, reflecting the terrified crowd in distorted fragments. It moved with a heavy, deliberate clank of servos, each step imprinting the soft soil. More figures followed, identical, forming a grim perimeter around the ship. They held weapons, blocky and functional, pointed not at the sky, but at the ground in ready alert. The lead figure took one more step forward. A speaker on its chest crackled to life. The voice that came out was not organic. It was a flat, synthesized growl, stripped of all emotion, speaking in the Aurelian tongue through a crude but functional translator. Identify the planetary authority. This zone is now under the protection of the Terran First Rapid Response Legion. The crowd was utterly silent. This was not an angel. This was a machine. A golem from a nightmare. Sue felt Una stiffen beside her. The High Priestess gathered her robes and stepped forward, her own light pulsing with a mixture of defiance and desperation. I am Una. We called for you. We prayed for deliverance. Her voice, usually melodious, sounded small against the mechanical stillness. The armored figure's head tilted slightly, a movement that was somehow more alien than any Vorax twitch. Prayer acknowledged. Directive received. We are the deliverance. The figure gestured with a massive gauntlet. Your people must evacuate this garden and the surrounding spires. We are fortifying this position. You have 1 hour. Evacuate? The Holy Citadel? Una's light flickered with outrage. This is our most sacred site. You cannot Vorax Vanguard elements will reach orbital engagement range in 6 hours. The voice interrupted, toneless. This location has the highest defensive elevation in the region. It will be the primary hardpoint. You will evacuate, or you will be in the way. Before Yuna could protest further, the human soldiers were moving. They did not ask permission. They began erecting barricades of quick-hardening alloy from their ship, sealing off arches, setting up glowing tripods that hummed with lethal energy. They cut down the singing trees, ancient and wise, to clear lines of sight. The sound of snapping crystal wood was like bones breaking. Sue watched, her hope crumbling into ash. They were not saviors. They were a second invasion, more abrupt and just as terrifying. She saw an armored human, slightly smaller than the first, approach a delicate fountain carved by her ancestors. The human studied it for a second, then attached a small device to its base. A red light began to blink. "What are you doing?" Sue cried out, forgetting protocol. The soldier turned its dark visor toward her. A female voice, still synthetic, but slightly less deep, came from the armor. Explosive charge. Structural denial. If we fall, this collapses to block the passage. You would destroy our history? We would deny the enemy a path, the voice replied, and the soldier clanked away to continue its work. High above, more ships were descending, not to the city, but to the beautiful rolling hills and forests beyond. Instead of gentle landings, they fired great plumes of chemical fire from their undersides. The lovely blue-green fields, the habitats of gentle, glowing fauna, were set ablaze in precise geometric patterns. A controlled burn, creating a kilometers-wide barren kill zone around the city. To the humans, it was tactical preparation. To the Aurelians watching from the spires, it was the murder of their world Dot in orbit. Commander Min stood on the bridge of the unyielding Resolve, watching the tactical displays. Reports streamed in from the ground teams. Perimeter Alpha established. Kill Zone Beta ignited. Artillery emplacements online. He gave short, confirming nods. He saw the panic and confusion in the thermal scans of the alien crowds. He understood it. They had expected a gentle hand, not a mailed fist, thought his communications officer. Lee, who had been transferred to his ship, spoke quietly from her station. Her face was pale. "Sir, the Planetary Authority. They are pleading. They are asking why we are destroying their holy sites." Min didn't look away from the display showing the Vorax swarm, a creeping cloud of red markers on the edge of the system. "Tell them," he said, his voice calm and final, "that holiness is a poor defense against teeth. We are not here for their gratitude. We are here to break the enemy on these stones. If they wish to live, they will let us work." On the ground, the lead soldier, Sergeant Tay, oversaw the placement of a heavy plasma cannon. An Aurelian elder, glowing with furious shame, approached him, waving delicate hands. "You are monsters. You are no better than the Vorax." Tay's visor remained fixed on his work. He understood the words, but the emotion was just data. Finally, he triggered his external speaker. "The Vorax will not call you names. They will just eat you. Stand clear." The elder stumbled back, his light dimming in despair. The message was clear. These newcomers spoke a language beyond philosophy or faith. They spoke the cold, simple grammar of survival. And they were fluent Dot as the first human artillery batteries. Set up on the shattered remains of a meditation platform, fired their initial ranging shots into the distant hills. The sonic booms shook the very foundations of the citadel. The Aurelians huddled in the underground shelters they had been herded into, listening to the sounds of their world being methodically taken apart. Above them, Dot, Sue sat in the dark, not singing. The human with the female voice, G, had sealed the shelter entrance with a thick metal door, leaving them in the soft, fearful glow of the Aurelians themselves. They had prayed for angels to descend from heaven. Instead, demons had climbed out of hell. And now, they had to pray that these demons were stronger than the coming night. The sky over Lumen Prime turned from twilight to a sickly, bruised orange. It wasn't the sun's. It was the reflected glow of the massive fires burning in the kill zones. A grim, human-made sunset. In the bunker beneath the citadel, the air was thick with the scent of fear and damp soil. The Aurelian soft light did little to push back the darkness. Up above, the world was being remade by noise. Sue flinched as another thunderous crack split the air, followed by a series of deep, rhythmic booms. Thump, 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 thump. It was the human artillery, speaking its first words to the approaching enemy. There were no screams, no battle cries from above, just the mechanical, relentless sound of preparation. On the walls of the citadel, Sergeant G adjusted the tripod of her squad's heavy repeater. Her helmet display painted the distant tree line with targeting data. Her squad moved around her, silent but for the clank of armor and the click of power cells locking home. Below, in the scarred garden, she could see Sergeant Tay and his heavy weapons team stacking more alloy crates, ammunition, explosives, spare parts. They worked like ants, methodical and focused. Contact. Edge of the western burn. A calm voice said in G's ear. It was Corporal Min, their spotter, perched in the broken spire above. Multiple biosigns. They're here. G didn't respond. She flipped the safety off her weapon. On her private channel, she heard the voice of the young translator Lee, down in the command bunker. The Aurelian leadership is requesting to fight. They say they will not hide while their world is processed. Denied. Commander Min's voice cut in from orbit, flat and final. They'd be targets. And they'd be in the way. Tell them to stay in their hole if they want to see tomorrow. The first wave of Vorax wasn't a wave. It was a tide. It flowed out of the untouched forests, a rippling, churning mass of black and sickly purple. It moved silently, absorbing the light, the sound, even the warmth from the air. The Aurelians watching from remote sensors in the bunker felt a collective dread so deep it was like ice in their veins. This was what had consumed a dozen worlds. The human guns answered. The first artillery shells didn't explode on impact. They drilled into the heart of the swarm and then detonated inward, creating vacuum implosions that sucked hundreds of the Vorax forms into a collapsing point of nothingness, tearing them apart from the inside. The Aurelians had never conceived of such a weapon. It wasn't about damage. It was about erasure. The Vorax didn't slow. They adapted, spreading thinner. They reached the edge of the blackened kill zone. Ignition. Tay's voice grunted on the comms. Lines of fire erupted from the ground. Human flamethrowers, mounted on remote turrets, vomited rivers of sticky, burning promethium. The fire didn't just burn. It clung, it melted, it turned the advancing front of the swarm into a writhing, shrieking wall of flame. The Vorax had their first sound a high, mindless screech of consuming agony. The smell that washed back over the human lines was thick and organic, like a slaughterhouse. Sue, listening to the translated comms in the bunker, gagged. Yuna turned her face away, her light pulsing with nausea. This was not battle. This was butchery. The swarm pushed through the fire, sacrificing millions of its parts to clear a path. Chitinous, whip-like tendrils, hardened by the heat, shot toward the walls. Aurelian energy weapons would have taken minutes to burn through one. Human plasma cutters, wielded by engineers like Jun, who had been pressed into ground defense, hissed and flared blue, slicing the tendrils apart in seconds. The severed ends flopped, still twitching, on the stones. Then the Vorax reached the walls. They didn't climb. They flowed up like thick oil. A human soldier on the western parapet was too slow. The blackness enveloped his leg. There was no dramatic scream. His biosign just flashed red on G's display, then went gray. His squad mates didn't pause to mourn. They doused the area where he had been in a focused chemical spray that dissolved the Vorax matter, preventing it from absorbing his biomass and technology. They reclaimed the position and kept firing. G saw a cluster of Aurelians who had ignored the orders, trying to defend the minor shrine with their small personal energy projectors. Their shots were weak, sparkling against the Vorax mass. A tendril lashed out, wrapping around one. It pulled her, glowing with terror, toward the consuming dark. "Hold this line," G ordered her squad. She vaulted over the barricade. She landed with a heavy thud between the tendril and the rest of the Aurelians. She didn't shoot the tendril. She fired a concentrated pulse from her wrist-mounted emitter directly into the main body of the Vorax cluster it was attached to. The pulse was a radiation burst designed to scramble simple organic structures. The tendril spasmed and released its prey, going limp. G grabbed the stunned Aurelian and shoved her back toward the others. "Run now." Her synthesized voice held no comfort, only command. She turned as a new form pushed to the front of the swarm, a massive, jaw-like maw of hardened bone and sinew rushing toward her. G stood her ground, bracing her repeater. She didn't fire wildly. She waited for the targeting reticle in her helmet to flash green. Then she squeezed the trigger. A stream of superheated metal slugs, each the size of a finger, tore into the open maw. They didn't just punch through. They fragmented inside, ricocheting, shredding it from within. The creature, or whatever it was, collapsed in a heap of lifeless ooze. The battle raged for hours, a cycle of brutal, efficient violence. The humans fought in near silence. Kung chatter was terse. "Ammo, Sector 7. Seal that breach. Fall back to Line Beta." Their discipline was more terrifying than any war cry. They turned the beautiful citadel into a charnel house, a machine for killing. They used the sacred stones as cover, the holy arches as choke points they could saturate with fire dot in the bunker. Lee translated the updates, her voice growing hoarse. "The eastern wall is holding. They've lost contact with Fire Team 4. Commander Min is authorizing the use of tactical vibration mines in the lower gardens." Each update was a cold fact. Each fact meant more of the Aurelian world was being sacrificed finally, as the twin suns began to rise. Painting the smoke in ugly shades of red, the attack slowed. The swarm pulled back, leaving a landscape of blackened ooze, shattered stone, and human debris. The silence that followed was broken only by the crackle of dying fires and the low hum of human equipment. On the wall, G finally safetied her weapon. Her armor was streaked with alien residue and soot. She looked out over the field. It was a vision of hell, created by human hands to prevent a worse one down in the bunker. The door hissed open. Sergeant Tay stood there, his armor covered in even more grime, a long, deep scratch across his chest plate. He looked at the huddled, terrified Aurelians, their light dim in the gloom. "First wave is broken," his synthetic voice announced. "They will regroup. We have 6 to 8 hours. We will need your people to move ammunition and clear the dead biomass. It is a biohazard. It will start to regrow if not incinerated." Una stood, her form trembling not with fear now, but with a deep, weary anger. "You have turned our home into a furnace. You have burned our history. You fight with the cruelty of the void itself." Tay's helmet tilted. He seemed to process the words. "Yes," he said, simply. Then he turned and left, the metal door sealing behind him with a final, heavy thud. They had survived the night. But as Sue looked at the faces of her people, She saw not relief, but a new kind of terror. They were trapped in a fortress built by demons, protected by methods that felt like a different kind of consumption. The angels they prayed for would have saved their world. These demons had only, so far, saved their lives. The cost was etched in fire and blood across the morning sky. The silence after the battle was worse than the noise. It was a heavy, aching thing, filled with the smell of burning alien flesh and scorched stone. In the human-occupied sections of the citadel, the work never stopped. Soldiers in damaged armor moved with a tired, mechanical rhythm, hauling blackened biomass to incinerator pits, welding shut cracks in the barricades, their movements lit by the harsh glow of work lights. They spoke in short, functional phrases. There were no celebrations. Survival was just the first step. Below, in the main bunker that now served as the Aurelian refuge, the mood was one of shell-shocked horror. They had seen the battle through sensor feeds and the few small viewports. They had witnessed the methods. The controlled, industrial brutality of it all had extinguished the last flicker of hope that these were misunderstood saviors. Sue sat beside Yuna, watching the High Priestess. Yuna's light, usually so steady, flickered with a deep, simmering fury. She was gathering her robes, her delicate hands clenched into fists. "I must speak to their leader," Yuna said, her voice low and firm. "They cannot continue this desecration." Lee, the translator, looked up from her corner, her human face pale with exhaustion. "Commander Min is on the orbital ship. The ground commander is Sergeant Major Tay. He is busy." "Then I will speak to him," Yuna said, and moved toward the sealed door before anyone could stop her. Sue followed, a nervous flutter in her core. Lee, after a moment's hesitation, went with them. They found Tay not in a command center, but at the edge of the incinerator pit. He had removed the chest plate of his armor, revealing a sweat-soaked black undersuit. A long, angry burn mark snaked up his neck. He was directing the disposal of a large, twitching chunk of Vorax matter, his real voice a rough, tired baritone. "Make sure it's fully in. I don't want it regenerating from a scrap." Yuna stepped into the circle of light, her own glow making the grim scene even starker. "Sergeant Major." Tay turned, his eyes hard, dark, and deeply weary settling on her. He did not bow. He simply waited. "Your people fight with a cruelty we cannot comprehend," Yuna began, her voice gaining strength from her anger. "You burn our gardens. You shatter our holy stones for your barricades. You use weapons that cause agony beyond measure. You are not saving our soul. You are burning it away to save the empty shell. Is this the only way your species knows? To become monsters to fight monsters?" Lee translated softly, her own eyes on the ground. Tay listened. He wiped grease and soot from his face with the back of a scarred hand. He didn't look angry. He just looked old. He gestured to a nearby crate. "Sit." Yuna remained standing, defiant. Sue slowly sat, drawn by the sheer exhaustion in the human's posture. Tay didn't insist. He picked up a small data slate from the crate. He tapped it, and a hologram sputtered to life above it. It wasn't an image of Lumen Prime. It showed a different world. A human city, or what was left of it. Twisted metal skeletons of buildings reached for a toxic-looking sky. The ground was gray and cracked. There were no bodies, but the sense of utter extinction was absolute. "This was New Halifax," Tay said, his voice flat. "Colony world. 2 million people. They prayed, too. Maybe to their gods, maybe just for a miracle. They waited for a gentle solution. They tried to reason. They died." He swiped the image. Another world, this one a frozen desert of jagged ice. This was Persephone Outpost. They used energy-based weapons, like yours. To disable, to scare. It didn't scare what came for them. It just showed our enemy our best tricks. Another swipe. A blackened, airless rock. This is what's left of Sanctuary 3. There is no one left to pray there. He let the images hang in the air. The horror in them was different from the Vorax. It was colder, more final. We learned. Tay continued, looking not at Yuna, but at the burning pit. We learned that the universe doesn't care about fair fights or beautiful philosophies. It cares about what eats and what gets eaten. Your prayer reached us. We heard help us. We didn't hear save our flowers. We came to do the one thing we have learned to do. Make the thing that wants to eat you stop. By any means. By all means. Yuna's anger was still there, but it was now mixed with confusion. So you chose to become this? To embrace the darkness? For the first time, Kay's expression changed. A faint, bitter twist of his lips. We didn't choose to become demons, priestess. The universe made us into them. We just got good at the role. He tapped his chest. This burn? From their acid. If we'd waited for a kinder weapon, I'd be a puddle helping that thing grow. There is no grace in survival, only in the will to continue. He stood up, his body aching. You asked if this is the only way we know. Yes, it is the only way that works. We are offering you the only gift we have left, tomorrow. Even if it's an ugly tomorrow, built on the ashes of everything you loved. It is still a tomorrow. The Vorax don't offer that. He walked away, back to the pit, leaving the data slate on the crate. The images of the dead human world still glowed faintly. Sue reached out and picked up the slate. She looked at the frozen hellscape of Persephone. She imagined the people there, hoping, waiting for a mercy that never came. She looked at Yuna, whose light was now dim with something other than anger. A dawning, horrific understanding. They are not cruel because they enjoy it, Sue whispered. They are cruel because they think it is the only kind of strength left. Lee, who had been silent, spoke softly. He's not wrong. We've lost so much. We look at you, at your beautiful world, and we see all the worlds we couldn't save. We're not here as angels. We're here as scars, trying to prevent another one. Yuna closed her eyes. The fight drained out of her. The moral certainty that had sustained her was gone, replaced by a terrible gray reality. The humans were not evil. They were broken. Broken by a universe that had repeatedly shattered them. And they had hardened the sharp pieces into weapons. Later, when the sensors warned of the Vorax's second, larger wave beginning to move, Yuna gathered her people. Her voice was different. There was no music in it. They are not what we prayed for, she said to the gathered Aurelians. They are something else. They are the answer to a cry in the dark, not a call to the light. They will fight again. They will burn more of our world to save it. We can hate them for it. Or we can understand that they are giving us the only thing they possess, a ruthless, ugly chance. I will not hide in this hole and let them fight alone for a tomorrow I am too proud to accept. She looked at Sue, then at the others. They will not teach us hymns. They will teach us how to hold a gun. They will not show us grace. They will show us how to survive. Who will learn? The silence in the bunker was absolute. Then, one by one, lights began to pulse, not with hope, but with a new, grim determination. Hands rose. Sue's was the first dot up on the wall. G was checking the charge on a plasma cutter when she saw them coming. Aurelians, led by Yuna and Sue, moving with hesitant but deliberate steps out of the bunker. They walked toward the stack of human ammunition crates, not the weapons themselves. They began, without being asked, to form a line, passing the heavy blocks of alloy and energy cells from the storage point to the soldiers on the wall. Chi watched for a moment. Then she walked over to Sue, who was struggling with the weight of a power cell. Ji took it from her with one armored hand and placed it on a cart. She pointed to a stack of lighter, cylindrical objects. These are coolant packs. They go to the plasma teams on the western ramp. Don't shake them. Sue nodded, her light steady. She wasn't praying anymore. She was working. The prayer was over. The work of demons had begun. The second wave was not a wave. It was the ocean. The Vorax had learned. They came not as a single crushing tide, but from everywhere at once. They seeped from the burnt ground, flowed over the unscorched northern cliffs, and dropped in heavy, spore-like pods from the bioships that now choked the upper atmosphere. The sky was a pulsating, living ceiling of violet and black. The human fleet in orbit was a storm of its own. Bright flashes of plasma and railgun fire tearing into the Vorax motherships. But for every one that died in a silent explosion, 2 more seemed to take its place. On the ground, the noise was a constant physical force. The human artillery fired until the barrels glowed white-hot, then were swapped out by crews of humans and Aurelians working side by side in frantic, wordless teams. Sue's arms ached from carrying the heavy coolant packs, but the fear was gone, burned away by a desperate need to do something. She saw Yuna not far away, directing a group of her people to clear a blocked drain of biomass before it could regenerate. The High Priestess was shouting orders, her voice raw, her light flickering, not with elegance, but with frantic energy. Sergeant G's voice was a constant calm thread in the chaos of the comms. North Wall, suppressive fire on the cluster at Grid 7. They're trying to form a breach pod. Jun, we need an airburst over the central garden now. They're massing under the arches. Jun, from a gun nest he'd welded into the highest remaining spire, adjusted the trajectory of his missile launcher. On it. Brace for shockwave. The missile shot skyward, then exploded 50 meters above the garden, raining shrapnel and chemical agents down on the forming mass below. The Vorax shrieked, a sound that was now familiar, almost routine. But routine broke. A section of the ancient southern wall, weakened by fire and acid, gave way with a roar of crumbling stone. A river of Vorax, a concentrated spear point of the swarm, poured through the gap. It surged toward the heart of the citadel, toward the main bunker, where the wounded and the children were hidden. Commander Min's voice cut through from orbit, harder than stone. That breach cannot stand. Contain it or collapse the entire sector. We are losing orbital superiority. This is the last push. On the ground, Sergeant Major Tay heard the order. Containing it was impossible. The swarm was moving too fast. Collapsing the sector meant burying hundreds of his own soldiers, and who knew how many Aurelians. He saw only one path. All units, this is Tay. We are punching back. Heavy weapons. Focus everything on the flanks of that breach stream. Box them in. Assault teams with me? We go into the river. He turned to G, who was already reloading. You have the wall. G nodded, her visor hiding her grim expression. Don't get dead, Sergeant Major. Tay didn't answer. He slammed his helmet back on, his synthetic voice booming to the 20 humans nearest him. Demons dance on me. Forwards. He jumped from the parapet, not down into the garden, but directly into the churning black river of Vorax flowing through the breach. The other soldiers followed. They fell into the swarm like stones into a torrent, firing point blank, using flamethrowers and saw blades mounted on their arms. They weren't trying to kill at all. They were trying to be a rock in the stream, to slow it, to divert it, to make it bunch up. It was suicide, but it was a purposeful, calculated suicide. From the wall, G and the others poured fire into the edges of the swarm, trying to cut off its source, as Tay had ordered. Sue watched, frozen, as the armored forms were slowly swallowed by the darkness. One by one, their biosigns on the human tactical displays winked out. Taze was the last to go. Holding a position for a full minute after everyone else had fallen, a single point of terrible. Defiant light in the blackness before it, too. Was extinguished. The sacrifice worked. The swarm, confused and condensed by the furious attack in its middle, became a denser, slower target. Now, Jun! Now! G screamed into the COMMs. Jun, his hand steady, fired his last, largest missile. It was not an anti-personnel round. It was a bunker buster, designed for hardened structures. It shot straight into the mass of Vorax packed in the breach, right where Tay's signal had last glowed. The explosion was different. It was a deep, subsonatic hump that vibrated in the bones before it was heard. A gout of earth and black fragments and white-hot fire erupted, sealing the breach under a mountain of molten stone and annihilated flesh. The Vorax advance in the center shattered, but the cost was on the wall. The diversion had pulled troops from everywhere. A new surge hit the western ramp, where the Aurelians were helping. A tendril lashed out, grabbing Yuna around the waist, lifting her off her feet. Sue screamed, a sound of pure loss. But before the tendril could retract, a charcoal-gray shape slammed into it. It was G. She had leapt across a 5-meter gap. She didn't have a clear shot. Instead, she activated her arm-mounted cutting blade and sawed through the tendril just above Yuna. They fell together in a heap. G rolled, coming up between Yuna and the swarm, her armor smoking from acid splashes. "Get back!" G yelled, her voice finally cracking with strain. She fired her repeater one-handed, the other arm hanging limp, its systems fried. The Vorax pressed in. Then a new sound. Not the boom of guns, but the high-pitched whine of Aurelian energy projectors. A dozen, then 100 thin, bright beams of blue light shot past G. They were weak, inefficient. But they were focused. The Aurelians, led by Sue, had picked up the fallen human sidearms, the simpler, kinetic rifles they could manage. They formed a ragged line behind G, firing without skill, but with a desperate courage. They were not soldiers, but they were no longer just victims. The combined chaotic fire drove the Vorax back just enough. In orbit, Commander Min, seeing the ground holding by a thread, made a final call. All remaining ships. Full burn. Ram the lead bioship. Aim for the core. The human fleet, battered and broken, turned their dying vessels into spears. One after another, they shot into the gargantuan Vorax mothership, detonating their warp cores on impact. The sky lit up with a silent, purifying fire that burned the violet haze away, revealing the stars for the first time in days. On the ground, the swarm shuddered. Then, like a puppet with its strings cut, it went still. The individual parts twitched and then melted into inert, greasy sludge. The silence returned. This time, it was empty. Hollow.G deactivated her broken blade and sank to her knees. Sue rushed to Yuna, who was alive, her light faint but steady. All around, humans and Aurelians stood or sat amidst the ruins. They were covered in the same filth, nursing the same kinds of wounds. Weeks later, the human fleet, what was left of it, was preparing to leave. The Vorax were gone, not just from Lumen Prime, but eradicated from the system. The cost was written in the melted craters where gardens once grew, in the new, stark alloy walls replacing the ancient stone, and in the names scrolling on memorial displays in both languages. At the new, functional landing pad, Commander Min stood in a simple uniform. Facing Yuna and Sue, the Aurelian world was scarred, but it was alive. New growth, tough and resilient, was already pushing through the ashes. "We will leave a garrison if you wish," Min said, his voice still quiet, but without its former ice. "And the schematics for the weapons, the defenses." The galaxy is not kind. You should be ready." Yuna looked at him, then at the humans working on their ships. She saw not demons now, but something else. Survivors. Like them. "We do not wish for a garrison," Yuna said. "But we will accept the schematics. And we ask for one more thing. An embassy. And an alliance. Not of light, but of those who have learned to stand in the dark." Min considered this. He gave a slow, single nod. "We can agree to that." Sue stepped forward, holding out a simple data crystal. "Our historians have made a record of what happened here. We have not called it the Deliverance. We have called it the Covenant of the Scarred. We would like you to have it." Min took the crystal. It felt light in his hand. He understood. It was not a thank you. It was an acknowledgement. A shared wound. "We will add it to our records," he said as the last human ship, the battered, unyielding Resolve, lifted into the sky. Sue stood with her people. They did not sing hymns of gratitude. They stood in respectful silence, watching the angular, grim shapes ascend. They had prayed for angels. The earth had sent demons instead. And the demons, with their brutal, ugly hands, had given them a future. A future they would now have to defend themselves, with the hard lessons learned. As the ships vanished into the warp, leaving a trail of blue light against the stars, Sue felt no anger, no fear. Only a solemn, solid certainty. The universe did not send angels. It only offered chances, and the strength, however hard and dark, to take them. They were no longer a people who prayed. They were a people who would stand ready.